Today, we're going to completely dismantle literally everything you thought you knew about getting motivated. I mean, if you've ever just sat there staring at a blank page, or a pair of running shoes, or a wildly messy room, just waiting for that magical spark of energy that, let's be honest, never actually comes, well, you are exactly in the right place. We're going to break down the actual psychology of human drive and totally rewire how you approach your goals. Let's jump right in. So let me ask you this directly. Are you constantly waiting for the perfect mood? You know, waiting for inspiration to suddenly hit before starting a workout, or learning a new skill, or tackling that massive project. We all tell ourselves, I just need to feel ready. But somehow, that perfect magical feeling never seems to show up, does it? You want to do the work. You want to read more. You want to finally launch that project you've been obsessing over for months. But instead of acting, you just wait.
Which brings us to part 1, the motivation myth, where tomorrow mysteriously becomes next week. See, we've basically been conditioned to treat motivation like fuel. We think we have to fill up the tank before the car can even move. But look at these two totally different approaches. On one hand, you've got the person dependent on a feeling, just waiting for the stars to perfectly align. And on the other hand, you've got a doer, someone who just commits to 5 minutes a day, completely regardless of how they feel. So who's going to win out? The answer is pretty obvious, right? The doer understands this massive secret about human psychology that the waiter completely misses. They absolutely refuse to be held hostage by their own mood.
I mean, we've all said it. I'll begin tomorrow. I'll work out when I'm more in the mood. I'll start when I actually feel motivated. And hey, it feels totally harmless in the moment. It feels like you're just giving yourself a little grace. But here is the real pain of procrastination. Tomorrow inevitably becomes next week. Next week quietly turns into next month. And before you even realize it, months turn into literal years of lost time and unfulfilled potential. It is a sneaky psychological trick we play on ourselves just to avoid feeling uncomfortable. All right, let's move on to part 2, the Locus Rule, and why it's such a massive paradigm shift.
So high achievers, they operate on a completely different wavelength. They rely on what's called the Locus Rule. It's this profound psychological principle that states action must precede motivation, not the other way around. It completely flips our baseline understanding of human drive right on its head. Think about it. Have you ever forced yourself to start a super tedious task you really didn't want to do, only to find yourself totally locked in 10 minutes later? At minute 0, you had absolute zero motivation. But by minute 10, you're entirely in the zone. It's like those prolific writers who just commit to opening their laptop every single morning. Writer's block be damned. The action always comes first.
Because here's the thing, motivation isn't magic, it is pure biology. When you actually force yourself to take action, that's step 1. Then your brain begins to recognize the progress you're making. And because it sees that progress, your brain gets excited and releases reward chemicals, like dopamine. It's only then, all the way at step 4, that you actually feel motivated. You suddenly feel productive and incredibly capable. But notice the sequence here. None of those awesome feel-good chemicals happen until you actually start. You have to be the one to trigger that cascade. Let's look at part 3. Shrinking the target. Lowering the barrier to action.
Okay, so how do we actually bypass all that heavy resistance and take that terrifying first step? Well, when a task feels huge and overwhelming, your brain literally perceives it as a threat. It looks at this exhausting, uncomfortable future and just blares the alarm bells to protect you from burning precious energy. Our brains can be so incredibly dramatic, right? They'd much rather choose the safety of the couch over the effort of the gym. But if you relentlessly shrink the task down to something unbelievably small, your brain's threat radar doesn't even blip. The resistance completely drops to 0. You just slip right past the alarm system.
Seriously, instead of staring at this massive mountain and telling yourself, I'm going to work out for a solid hour, just tell yourself, I'm going to do exactly 1 push-up. Instead of, I need to write a whole entire chapter today, commit to writing 1 single sentence. Instead of a grueling 3-hour study block, just commit to 5 minutes. I know, they sound almost laughably small, but they have a profoundly real physiological effect. They get you moving, they break the freeze. And that leads us to part 4, unstoppable momentum and the compounding journey. See, those tiny little sparks, they ignite the absolutely most powerful force in human behavior. Because the hardest part of almost any task is simply the beginning. It's overcoming that heavy inertia of just standing completely still. But once you're actually doing the thing, continuing is vastly easier.
Basic physics tells us that an object in motion tends to stay in motion. Well, your psychology works the exact same way. You just need to get in motion.
Because once you're moving, things really start to build. You take one step, and then another, and another. One single page of writing, which started by just sitting down to write that one ridiculous sentence, eventually becomes a completely finished book. What felt totally impossible yesterday suddenly feels entirely manageable today, simply because you broke the seal. And it just compounds. That one simple workout, literally that single push-up you committed to just to bypass your brain's resistance, becomes a 5-minute session, which becomes a daily habit, which eventually becomes a completely transformed, incredibly strong body. One tiny 5-minute skill session turns into genuine, deep expertise.
And ultimately, one single day of effort turns into a completely transformed life. The people we admire so much, those high achievers we constantly look up to, they aren't just magically gifted with some endless, overflowing supply of motivation. No way. They just understand the Locus Rule. They know that waiting for the perfect feeling is a total trap, so they take action way before the motivation ever shows up. One small step changes the entire direction of a day. A day changes a month changes a year, and a year, that changes your entire life.
So I'm going to leave you with this. Do not ask yourself, how can I get motivated to do this massive project? Forget that. Instead, ask yourself right now, what is the absolute smallest action you can take today? Find a task so small, so completely frictionless, that your brain can't possibly say no. Stop waiting. Motivation is not just sitting there hiding under a rock waiting to be found. It is created by you, right now, through action.